أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another one of our Mizan live sessions. Inshallah, this comes to you in the best of health and iman. So we'll be continuing, inshallah. Today is our second session from the new series of Mizan live sessions that we're doing. And alhamdulillah, in the first series, or the first session, I should say, that we had last week, we had very good feedback and it was well received. So inshallah, we will take into consideration the feedback that we were given. And hopefully we can improve as we move forward. For those who've been here before, they know. For those who are new, I'm just going to explain some of the introductory points that we have for today's session, and then we will get going as we usually do. So, we are covering the rulings of salat, but starting on that from the conditions of prayer, right? And the first condition of prayer that we were discussing was the timing of prayer, and last week was the first session where we went through a number of those rulings. I want to emphasize again that inshallah we will be covering some of the less known rulings of salat. It's getting very hot in here, so let me just... Okay, so we'll be covering some of the less known rulings when it comes to salat. We won't be spending too much time on the rulings that we all know. We all know we have to pray 5 times a day, hopefully. So we're not going to be spending too much time on those stuff, but more on stuff that is less known for people. Feel free, like always, to leave your comments, your questions. I'll be happy to answer any questions that come up. As I've mentioned before, if it's a question that you have regarding this topic, leave it here, right here in the chat, and I'll take a look at that, inshallah. If it's a question that has to do with a different topic, you can always inbox Mizan Institute's Facebook page. And inshallah, between me and Shaykh Amin, we will give the answer to the brothers who are managing the Facebook page, and they'll be able to take care of that and convey the answer to you guys, inshallah. One thing I do want to mention is 2 points. If you're going to ask a question, first of all, do mention who you follow, because that can make a big difference a lot of times in terms of answering the question. And number 2 is, if you do ask a question, if you're going to ask a question on the session, after the session is over, just send in a message on Facebook. Don't post it on the comments on the video, because we won't be able to see it. We'll be able to see it, but it might get a little lost in the comments. Facebook has a weird way of showing the comments when you're doing Facebook live sessions. It has its different settings, and sometimes it can get lost. So if you have a question after the session is over, feel free to just send a message to our inbox, and then inshallah we'll try to get back to, like I said, we'll pass on the answer to the brothers who are managing the Facebook page. So I mentioned that. Another point to mention is that as we go, the sessions are being indexed. So the index for the first session is ready. I'm not sure if the brothers have posted it yet or not, but we'll have an index. I actually indexed it today, and there was like, I don't know, 15, 20 different questions we went through. So it was a very packed session, the first session. So we will be adding those, and this session will also be indexed moving forward. And the last point, of course, which is always important, you'll always hear me saying, especially when we're discussing ahkam, is that if you have a piece of pen and paper and you're not driving, because I'm not going to be held liable for anything. If you're not driving, and if you're not, I don't know what they say on the labels of medicine sometimes. They say if you're not working with mechanics or like machinery or stuff like that. Basically, if you're not doing anything dangerous, take a piece of paper and a pen, or your laptop or your phone or whatever the case may be, and make notes as we go. That will make your life a lot easier later on when you want to remember a certain ruling. It's going to be slightly difficult to go through the whole video again, even though we're going to be adding indexes, so you could also do that as well. Alright, so last session, like I said, we discussed the rulings when it comes to the timings of prayer. This session, we're going to continue on that. Like always, feel free to send in your questions, and I will take a look at the questions right now, actually, just to see if we have any questions. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Bilal, Sister Safinas, Brother Arif. Very nice to have all of you guys with you. All of you guys with us. Okay, so let me do a quick review of last session. And when I say a quick review, trust me, it's actually a quick review. A lot of people will say we're going to do a quick review and then it turns into like a 20-minute thing, 30-minute thing. No, trust me, it's a quick review. So last session, the first concept that we talked about was that when it comes to the timings of each prayer, there are three types of timings that we talk about when we in fiqh, right? In jurisprudence, there's three types of timings that we're talking about. There is an allowed time for each prayer. An allowed time meaning the time in which you can pray your namaz with the intention of ada, right? And for most of us, this is the timing that we are pretty much familiar with. Like how long do you have to pray, like for example, Fajr namaz? How long do you have, for example, to pray Dhuhr and Asr and things of that nature? So that's number one. Then the second type of time that they mention for prayer is the preferred time. If you remember, we said in Arabic, they call this waqtul fadila, right? Fadl meaning something that's like greater and more enhanced and preferred, basically, as a rough translation, of course. So that waqtul fadila, we said we have multiple ahadith that if you pray your namaz during that waqtul fadila, what happens is that your namaz, it's the same 3 rakat that you were doing, it's the same 4 rakat that you were doing, but the thawab and the reward for it can be much, much greater simply because you're doing it in that time. And we mentioned that also that in some of the ahadith in which the imams have said, make sure that you guys pray namaz awwal waqtiha at the beginning of its time. It's referring to this fadila time. It's referring to this preferred time. Awwal waqtiha doesn't mean when they say adhan you pray like 20 seconds afterwards, like very quickly. No. It doesn't mean that necessarily. It means you understand what these preferred times are, and then based on that, you pray within that preferred time. Some of these preferred times, they are longer, like for Dhuhr and Asr, they might be longer actually. And we discussed all of these in the first session, so if you want to know exactly which prayer, what preferred time they have, you can go back to the first session. For Dhuhr and Asr, they're longer. For Maghrib in particular, it's probably the shortest would be for Maghrib. Fajr is also pretty short, not too short, but pretty short. And Isha is okay, it's a couple hours at least. So, usually at least. So that's the second type of time. And then we had the third type of time, which was the specific time. What was the specific time? The specific time basically, it's more of a fiqhi type of thing, so I didn't want to go into too much detail about it because we don't want to overcomplicate things. We are not going through everything that you find in these books. No, we're going through those that are practical and those that people actually deal with and have questions about, right? So this specific time, which they call waqtul khas or waqtul mukhtas, is a time in which for Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha, there is a specific time where you are only allowed to pray, for example, Isha. You're not allowed to pray Maghrib during that time. Or in the other group, you're only allowed to pray Asr. You're not allowed to pray Dhuhr. Okay? When does this happen? We mentioned last week that if you're running short on time and there's only enough time to do one salat before sunset, for example, you are supposed to do Asr prayer. You're not supposed to do the Dhuhr prayer. The Dhuhr prayer basically has already become qada. You have to do what? Your Asr prayer. Now we're going to explain a little bit more about that, about situations where you might have a doubt or things of that nature. Let me just pull up my chair. I think that'll be better. So we're going to talk more about that inshallah in this session. But this is the idea. Also for Maghrib and Isha, if you have only the amount of time in which you could pray one prayer before midnight, that you would have to do Isha prayer. You cannot do Maghrib prayer. Okay. Again, like I said, there's some things explained about that, but I'll get to that later on. So that's the second type of timing. The third type of timing. That's the specific time. 3 types of times we discussed. Then we said the timing for Maghrib and Isha is midnight. We explained how to calculate midnight. We said it's halfway between sunset and Fajr. And one of the brothers actually got back to me after the session and reminded me that when I was explaining, I said that you take this time and you split it in half and then you add that half to Maghrib adhan. And I was wrong. You're supposed to add that time to sunset. Okay, so halfway between sunset and Fajr, not halfway between Maghrib and Fajr. The difference probably be around like 10 minutes, 5 minutes anyways, but still important to note. Another important ruling that we discussed in the last session was that if someone does not pray their Maghrib and Isha before midnight, they still have to pray it before Fajr. It's kind of makes life a little difficult actually sometimes, because sometimes you forget about a namaz, or Maghrib and Isha in particular, and it's like 1 a.m. and you're thinking, oh, it's already Qada. So, I mean, you're not happy about that, hopefully, but it's already Qada, so you're going to move on now, right? You're probably going to go to sleep, and you're going to make up for it like tomorrow. But the maraji say, Ayatul Sistani and Ayatul Khamni, you have to make up for that before Fajr. The only difference is this. Ayatul Khamni says, between midnight and Fajr, if you're going to make up for it, you're going to do that with the intention of Ada Qada, right? Ayatul Sistani says it depends. If you skipped your prayer on purpose, then you're going to do it with the intention of Ada and Qada. If you didn't skip it on purpose, you just forgot, or you were asleep, or whatever the case may be, like you had a proper excuse, then you can still pray it before Fajr with the intention of Ada. Right? So if you forgot, according to Ayatul Sistani, if you forgot your prayer, you still have to pray it, and you have to pray with the intention of Ada. The time for your prayer has now been extended because you forgot until before Fajr. Okay. Then we went through some rulings. We said that as long as you have time to fit in at least one rakat of your prayer, you are going to pray with the intention of Ada. Of course, it's haram to delay your namaz to that point, because if you only have time to fit in one rakat of your prayer, that means technically 3 rakats or 2 rakats or at least another rakat is going to be outside of the allowed time, right? And that's not allowed. You're supposed to pray inside of the allowed time. So, it's not allowed for you to delay your prayer to that point, but if you do, you still have to pray with the intention of Ada. Second ruling is that if there is no time, and you're really running late, right? You need to cut out basically all of the mustahabbat that you're doing. I explained some of the mustahabbat in last session, like the 3rd and 4th rakah, only 1 tasbihat is wajib, not all 3 are wajib, right? In tashahud, we say Bismillah wa billah, Alhamdulillah, that's not wajib. We say وَتَقَبَّلْ شَفَاعَتَهُ وَارْفَعْ دَرَجَتَهُ, it's not wajib. We, qunut, of course, is not wajib. Even when it comes to salam, there are certain things that are not wajib, even though we're taught that, we're taught in a certain way. But even when it comes to salat, sometimes, salam, not everything is wajib there. And one of the sisters, actually, I'm not sure if it was a brother or a sister, who brought up this question, can you also skip the surah? So I'm going to take a little bit of time here. I know we're in the middle of our review, but I'm going to take a little bit of time here to explain this ruling, because this was something I wasn't sure about in the last session. And so I looked it up, and the person who brought it up, the brother or sister, was actually right about this. When you're running late, right, you have, basically you can skip the surah, or technically you would have to skip the surah, right? You have to skip the surah. By surah, I mean like the surah you recite after Suratul Hamd. Like usually it's Surah Qul Huwallah for most of us, right? Or maybe Surah Ikhlas, or Surah Kawthar, for example, or whatever the case may be, right? So you can skip that. This is ruling 598 from Minhaj al-Salihin, volume 1. تسقط الصورة في حال المرض والاستعجال وكذا في ضيق الوقت والخوف ونحوهما من موارد الضرورة. So basically he says that you can skip your surah when you are running late, right? In a number of situations, one of those situations is في ضيق الوقت, when you don't have enough time. فإنه يجوز الاقتصار فيها على قراءة الحمد وترك السورة بل يجب ذلك في سورة ضيق الوقت. In fact, it's wajib for you to do that if you're running low on time. Okay, so if you're running late, not only do you have to cut out mustahabbat, you should even cut out the surah that you are reciting as well. Another ruling that we discussed was that you cannot start your prayer until you are sure the time of prayer has actually come. Funny thing, I was dealing with this right now just myself, just like before starting the live session, because when we were going to start out, right now adhan in Dallas is 5:43-ish is what my timetable says. But I'm not 100% sure, so I give it a couple minutes, right? So 5:45. And you want to start because you got to prepare for a live session, right? Or like get things ready for the live session. But you cannot start until you are sure the time of adhan has actually come. And the last ruling, so based on this, one point that we made last week was that if you have different timetables, you would have to go, and you don't know which timetable is correct, you would have to go with the timetable that gives you a later time. Basically, you would have to take precaution to make sure that the adhan has actually come, the time of prayer has actually come. And the last ruling that we covered was that if you're in the plane and you're traveling from east to west or west to east, doesn't matter, because time is going to be passing by quicker or shorter, right? Again, not technically time, but you know, the time of sunrise and sunset is going to be passing by quicker in a quicker fashion, or sometimes in a slower fashion. How are you supposed to pray? The answer was you just pray based on however, in whatever situation that you're in. So if time is passing by slower, then you're going to be praying slower. You might do one prayer in like 20 hours, right? Because you're traveling with the sun, for example. Maybe if you're traveling from the west to the east, right? If you're going from like North America to the Middle East or to Asia, then that's going to be like 3 or 4 prayers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, like 3 or 4 prayers on your way back, right? If you live there, that would be the way back. So that's how to pray while you are on the plane. Can you pray while you are on the plane? Do you have to wait till you get off? We'll discuss all of that more, inshallah, when we get to the place in which someone is going to pray, which is another one of those conditions of salat, right? It is the as they say, makanul musalli, the place that someone is going to be offering their prayer. So that was a review. Of course, some of the points were new, but a review of what we discussed in the previous session. Let me just take a look here. Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Shuja, thank you for joining us. Dr. Akbar, thank you for joining us. Yes, and inshallah, we have an announcement about the live sessions that Shaykh Amin will be continuing. Allow me to just move the video a little bit down. I think that'll be better. Okay. So let's move on to the new points that we want to make for today's session. Okay. So the first ruling that I want to cover in today's session is this, that if you are, if someone wakes up, let's say they wake up late for namaz, right? If you're not sure if the time of namaz has become qada yet or not, the ruling is you absolutely have to pray your namaz. Okay? Why is this important? I'm sorry, let me just fix the positioning of the phone. I think this will be better. Okay. You actually have to you have to pray your namaz if you're not sure if the time has become qada or not. So for example, what do I mean by that? You wake up, let's say, you're not sure what time sunset is exactly. Maybe your phone or Google says it's like 5:10, whatever the case may be. You wake up at like 5:09, right? Or maybe you don't even know the time of sunset. You don't know when the time of sunset is, right? And you wake up and you're like, you look out the window, you're like, maybe it's sunrise already. Sorry, I was saying sunset, I meant sunrise. Maybe you look and you see it's almost sunrise already, but you're not sure. You still have to get up and you still have to pray, right? All of those rulings that we were talking about when we said that you have to cut out the mustahabbat, you have to cut out the surah, you have to do this, you have to do that when you're running late, brothers and sisters, is when you are sure you are running out of time. If you're not sure that you are running out of time, in the sense that you are not sure that I have to cut out this part, okay? In other words, if you're not sure that if I cut out this part, my namaz will end up being over the time, then you have to do the parts that you have to do. You cannot skip the surah, and you can also do the mustahabbat as well. Yes, if you become sure that if I add in this part, it's going to push me beyond the time that's allowed, that's when you have to cut out everything that we were talking about. And this is really important, brothers and sisters, right? A lot of times we might wake up for Fajr, maybe we're late. You wake up for Fajr, you say, oh, it's like really, I'm pretty sure the sun has risen already. If you're pretty sure, that's not enough. You have to get up and you have to pray. Even if there's a chance that your namaz has already become qada, you still have to do that. All right. So that was one ruling that we wanted to cover. Moving on to a second ruling, and this ruling is a really important one. A lot of times people will pray. Sometimes this will happen for months and months. They will pray their namaz. After praying their namaz for months and months, they realize, uh-oh, this time that I was praying my namaz actually turned out to be wrong. Right? So let's say they had a timetable. This timetable was telling them that, you could pray at like 5:10. And then they pray at like 5:12 for like 6 months. Afterwards, they find out that no, another timetable, or, they find out a more precise timing for namaz. And they realize that, like my namaz was wrong this whole time, right? Or to give you an even better example, there are times, for example, where someone might pray, they might forget about daylight savings. Like daylight savings comes and goes, right? Like the namaz used to be at 1:30, now it's at 12:30. Or let's switch it over. It was at 12:30, now it's at 1:30. And this person gets up and prays his namaz at 12:45 every day, right? For like a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Sometimes this happens. So what's the ruling when you pray your namaz and then later on you find out that you were praying during the wrong time? The ruling is, unfortunately, you have to make up for all of those prayers if all of your prayer ended up falling outside of the allowed time. If some of the namaz, or like at least one rakat of it, ended up in the time, that would be a different situation and you wouldn't have to make up for it. But if all of it ended up out of the time, like the examples that we gave, that like namaz is like 20 minutes later you're praying, you will have to make up for all of these prayers. So let me just read this ruling. This is ruling 508 from Minhaj al-Salihin. إذا تيقن بدخول الوقت. If someone goes and finds out about the timing of prayer and he's absolutely sure about it, right? He has yaqeen about the timing of prayer. Like he looked it up and like he even checked his watch and whatever, right? أو أحرزه بطريق معتبر, or he figured it out through a طريق معتبر. I don't want to explain what that is. It's not something we deal with very often. فصلى, and then he prayed. ثم تبين أنها وقعت قبل الوقت لزم إعادتها. If then he finds out that he prayed this before the timing had even come and all of his prayer ended up outside of the allowed time, then he is going to have to make up for the prayer. And then he continues with the rest of the rulings, right? So that's not going to be allowed. And Ayatollah Khamenei also has the same ruling. This one happens because sometimes timetables go wrong, or sometimes we don't realize and we pray before the time, or maybe even after the time sometimes. Okay, let me take a look, see if we have any questions. Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Hussein, Brother Inayat, Brother Abuzar. Hope you're doing well, Brother Abuzar. Dr. Akbar asks the question, what if we are sure we still have time and do all surahs and mustahabbas and later realize that we went over the allowable time? Then what's the ruling? That would be okay because you did what you had to do in that particular situation. And later on, if all of your namaz ends up being outside of the time, that's a problem. But if not all of your namaz, like only a portion of it ended up out of the time, then you're going to be fine. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, moving on. Let me move on to the next ruling that we'll be covering. Yes, this one is actually a very important one. What is this ruling? This is about situations where you might have to actually pray ahead of time, right? At the beginning of the time. Maybe you want to pray during the preferred time, the waqtul fadila. But the issue is this. You have an excuse, a situation, a problem where you cannot do your prayer the way it normally needs to be done. What do I mean by that? There are times, for example, where you want to pray at the beginning of the time, but you cannot do wudu at that time. So like you want to do tayammum, for example, right? Or you want to even do wudu jabira, which is a different type of wudu, and hopefully we'll get to that at some point, right? Let's say, for example, you have a cut on your hand, and this cut of on your hand is bleeding, right? And it's bleeding a lot. So much so that right now you cannot even wash off all of the blood. But if you give it time, like 3 or 4 or 5 hours, you might be able to wash off the blood and just do a normal wudu, for example, right? These are situations where you want to pray at the beginning of time, but at the beginning of time, you have some sort of an excuse, some sort of a situation that if you wanted to offer your prayer, you would have to alter something that's normally done in prayer and do it a different way. Like your wudu, you would have to alter your wudu, for example. This is an example for wudu and tayammum. I'll give you an example about situations where you want to pray at the beginning of time and you don't alter your like wudu or your tayammum or anything like that, but you alter the way that you're going to pray, right? So for example, let's say I just came back from playing a game, right? And my muscles are so sore, hypothetically, hypothetically, because that never happens to me. Just kidding. But let's just say my muscles are so sore right now, or I have some sort of an issue with my foot that I cannot stand up right now and pray. If I wanted to pray at the beginning of time, I would not be able to do that. Let's say I have headaches right now, and because of that, I cannot stand up and pray, right? And now, what I want to do is I want to pray at the beginning of time. They just said adhan, and I want to quickly pray my namaz. But if I pray, I'm going to have to pray sitting down, for example. I might have to pray in an unnormal way, an abnormal way, or a different way. I'm going to alter something with my salat. These are different situations. Right now, for example, I have a really bad stomach ache. Not now. I'm saying this is an example. If I have a really bad stomach ache right now, right, where I can't even get up out of bed. So how am I going to pray if I wanted to pray right now? I just pray while I'm lying down. Or maybe I'll just sit and pray, right? But maybe if I give myself 3-4 hours to settle down, take a nap maybe, take some pills, right? Self-medicate. Why not? Maybe I'll feel better later on, right? So this is the question. Am I allowed to go and pray at the beginning of time, even though there's a chance that my excuse will go away, my situation will be solved in 2 or 3 hours later on, right? We gave multiple examples for this. So what's the ruling on this? Ayatollah Khamenei says this. Listen, he says that if that situation that you're dealing with is a situation that's forcing you to do tayammum, okay? With tayammum, you don't have to wait, even though there is a chance that later on you could do normal wudu. Okay? So he says if you're stuck between tayammum and normal wudu, it's okay. You can do your tayammum now and pray right now. Okay? Now there's a point that's coming up, so just wait for that. Don't disconnect right now, because that point is very important. So stay with us. Now he says if it's tayammum, you can go ahead and do your tayammum and start praying. Even if you say, hey, maybe later on I'll be able to do wudu. He says, okay, you can do your tayammum and pray right now. The other excuses, like praying sitting down, no, he says for those, you have to wait and see, will that situation solve itself? This is, of course, in situations where there is a chance that that situation will solve itself, right? If someone is, let's just say, physically disabled, well, of course, 3 or 4 hours is not going to make a difference, right? So they're going to pray sitting down or whatever the case may be from the very beginning. Someone knows, for example, these headaches that they have, it's going to be there for the next 3 hours. Or they don't even have 3 hours. It's only 30 minutes left till adhan. Okay, you can just pray right now, because you know that this situation is not going to be solved within the next 30 minutes, 2 hours, until you have time to pray, right? That's Ayatollah Khamenei's ruling. Ayatollah Sistani's ruling is pretty much the exact opposite, right? He says with tayammum and wudu, you have to wait, right? He says, but with other things, you can pray, even if there's a chance that that issue will be solved later on, like the sitting down and not standing up. Okay. Now, here's the catch. The issue with these rulings, not the issue, but something you have to remember, is that if your situation does get solved later on, then in certain situations, you do have to make up for your prayer. So to be on the safer side, if you have an excuse, whether it's tayammum, between tayammum and doing wudu, or like sitting or praying sitting down or praying standing up, right? Or any of these situations, it's better to just wait. If you feel like there's hope that the situation might solve itself, or sorry, even if you feel like no, it's not going to solve itself, just wait until it comes closer to the time where you're pretty much absolutely sure that it's not going to solve itself. Then you could do your prayer. Otherwise, like I said, sometimes you might do it, even though it's allowed, like I mentioned, you will have to make up for that prayer sometimes later on. Let me see if let me read off of this ruling from the book of Ayatollah Sistani. This is again from Tawzi'ul Masail Jami' of Ayatollah Sistani, ruling 903. This part is in Farsi, so I'll read just very quickly and we will move on. Yes, he says, هرگاه انسان عذری دارد که اگر بخواهد در اول وقت نماز بخواند ناچار است آن را با تیمم به جا آورد، چنانچه مایوس از برطرف شدن آن عذر باشد یا احتمال دهد با تأخیر انداختن نماز از تیمم هم ناتوان شود، میتواند در اول وقت تیمم کند و نماز بخواند. ولی اگر مایوس نباشد باید صبر کند تا عذرش برطرف شود یا مایوس شود. So with Ayatollah Sistani, he says, hey, if it's tayammum, then you have to wait. You have to make sure that this is something that's not going to solve itself. If it's other than tayammum, he says, yeah, sure, go ahead. But if it gets solved later on, you might have to make up for it. So better thing to do is probably just give up on the reward of fadila time for that particular namaz that you're dealing with. Don't quote me on that. And just wait until later, until you're sure and you can do your namaz in whichever way that you need to at that point. Okay, so I hope that the ruling was clear. Let me just check to see if we have any questions coming in. Dr. Akbar is asking, is it makruh or haram to intentionally delay time of fazila? No, time of fazila is time of fazila. It's mustahab. It's one of those very important mustahabs. There's a lot of emphasis on it. We have we have quotes from like scholars saying how important it is that if someone sticks to the fadila time of prayers, they can sometimes reach some higher spiritual statuses, basically. So it's very much recommended. It's not a normal mustahab. It's like one of those mustahabs that has a lot of recommendation. However, it's not haram or anything like that. You could say it's makruh in the sense that it's better to pray during the time of fadila, but it's not makruh in and of itself. There's a long discussion on when doing something is mustahab doesn't mean not doing it is makruh. It's a fiqhi discussion and doesn't really relate to what we're trying to cover too much over here. But if you can do it during your preferred time of namaz, then obviously we should strive to do that. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to another very practical ruling. That practical ruling is this, brothers and sisters. Situations where someone repeatedly is not getting up for fajr, right? What is the ruling there? And I'll pose this question in this way. There are situations where it happens sometimes where a person might go 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and even though he might he's sleeping at a time that there is a chance he might wake up for fajr, he's not, right? So what is the ruling there? Is it wajib for this person to step up his game, basically sleep earlier or do something about it or not? Or another question that comes up that has to do with the same issue is this: when I'm going to sleep, do I have to set up an alarm time and all this stuff to at least give myself a chance to wake up for fajr? Or no, can I just go to sleep and say, hey, I'm going to go to sleep. If I wake up, I wake up. If I don't wake up, I was asleep. It's not like I didn't pray on purpose. I was asleep. So there's two parts to the answer to this question, and both of them are important. So don't just hear one of them and then walk away, because the second one is really important. And if you don't pay attention to the second one, then there's going to be a misunderstanding. So the ruling is this: when it comes to the timings of prayer, as long as you are giving yourself a chance to pray, in the sense that, like, for example, I'm going to sleep at a time where I know there's a chance I'll wake up for fajr, right? Then that's enough, technically. Now, we're not done. Hold on. We're not done. However, if I see that it happens over and over again where I'm not waking up, right? So this is not a one-time thing now. It's like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times now. This is happening over and over again. Then we have another ruling that only comes into play with regards to salat. Well, I shouldn't say only. There are some other situations where it comes into play, but particularly it comes into play when it comes to salat. What is that ruling? That ruling is this, brothers and sisters. When it comes to salat, not only are you not supposed to miss your salat on purpose, you are also not supposed to take your salat lightly. What does that mean? So with normal things, right? If you place yourself in a situation where you place yourself in a situation where there's a chance you will be able to take care of that task, that wajib, and for whatever reason you're not able to do that, they say, okay, well, he wasn't able to do it. With namaz, if this repeats so much that people point to you and say, hey, he's taking his prayer lightly, then you actually have to step up your game. So let me give you a real life example. Let's say I sleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Namaz is like 6 o'clock in the morning, right? Am I doing something haram if I do that 1 night or 2 nights or 3 nights? No, you're not doing anything haram because there's a chance you will wake up on time, right? Let's say I'm also putting like an alarm. Okay, so there's a chance I might wake up on time to pray my namaz. On time, when I say on time, I mean within the allowed time. However, if I fall asleep 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 times, people, they say, like in the common view, they would say, oh, he's taking prayer lightly. Even though every night you're sleeping, there's a chance you might wake up on time, right? You're not sabotaging your chance to wake up completely, but because this is continuing, the common view will say he's taking his prayer lightly. And taking your prayer lightly, even if you're praying it sometimes, but overall your conduct is in such a way where you're taking your namaz lightly, that becomes haram in and of itself. So now, even though if I slept at 3 o'clock, there was still a chance I would wake up for namaz, I have to start sleeping at 2 o'clock, at 1 o'clock. I have to step up my game because my conduct has been in such a way that the common view would say, hey, he's taking salat lightly. Like I said, with other duties in Islam, we don't have this, brothers and sisters. When it comes to namaz, we do have this, where you cannot take your namaz lightly. So even if you end up missing your salat accidentally over a number of times, after a while, if this continues, then you have to step up your game. Even if what you're doing still gives you a chance to wake up on time, but this is an extra step that we have with namaz, that you have to step up your game so that people don't say, hey, he's taking, when I say people don't say, it's not like anyone's stalking you, watching you during Fajr. That's not what I mean, but like if they were to know, they would say, hey, he's taking his namaz lightly. And I cannot emphasize enough how much ahadith we have on this topic of you're not supposed to take your namaz lightly, and how that can create, how we have hadith actually, I believe, that like, for example, I think it's from Imam Qadim, that someone who takes his namaz lightly, like shafa'at is not going to be granted to him on that day. That's like one of the hadith we have about this, the issue of namaz. All right. So that was another one that I wanted to cover with you guys. Let me see if we have any questions coming up. Let's put this down a little bit more. You'll forgive me, but this, I don't know why the phone is giving me some trouble. Okay. Sister Safinas is asking, is it makruh to pray when you are sleepy? Yes, from what I remember, it's, I don't know if it's makruh, but I definitely say it's not recommended. Anything that can take away from your attention in salat is better, and it's not recommended to do it in that way. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, moving on. Today is we don't have that many questions coming in. So if you guys have questions, send them in because we're going to be ending soon, inshallah. Okay, now I'm going to move on to like 3 or 4 other rulings. These are rulings that that won't impact our prayer as much as the rulings that we've been discussing up until now, but they're rulings that are good to know. So I'll start with one of them. One of them, I'm mentioning this just because it's interesting and it can highlight certain things and the importance of certain things for us. The first ruling is this, is that if you're praying and someone comes and asks for a debt that you were supposed to pay, a loan that you had taken from them. It's interesting, and I know this is kind of a random ruling, it may seem, but I want to mention this just because it's very interesting, because this is something that our scholars have mentioned, that if you're praying and the person who had given you that loan, he comes and he asks for the loan that he had given to you, they say that you should not be praying. So it's very interesting how the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the rights of people, although they don't coincide very often, it's very rare, but in situations where they do coincide, you will see that a lot of times God will give preference to the rights of the people, because those people are His family. And this is mentioned actually in some of the ahadith that we have, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that like these ibad, these servants of mine, are part of my ayal, they are part of my a'ilah, they're part of my family, right? So imagine you're trying to like get closer to someone and then you like disrespect his son. It's not going to go too well between you and him, right? So that's interesting. Ayatollah Khamenei has that. Ayatollah Sistani also has that ruling. In fact, they say that if you can't pay his loan without breaking your prayer, you have to break your prayer. Now, of course, that's not something we deal with all the time. But again, it's just something interesting I wanted to mention. It was very interesting for myself as well. Okay. Okay, we already covered this. I think we have a question that has come in. Oh yes, Brother Ali Juma. How are you, Brother Ali? Nice to hear from you. Will praying your salat separately but on time for each individual one give you the full spiritual benefit as praying on time and in pairs? So this was a question that we actually covered slightly, not fully, in the last session. The idea is this, brothers and sisters. The best way of doing your prayers is in its preferred times. Okay, and to figure out the preferred times, you could go to the first session. Now, some of these preferred times, sometimes there's a gap between them. Like with Maghrib and Isha, there's actually a gap between the time of, like, in the sense that they don't have overlap with one another. Because of that, it makes sense for you to do your Maghrib and then wait, and then do your Isha maybe like 20 minutes, 30 minutes later. Okay. With Dhuhr and Asr, I believe some of the maraji have a ruling like that, where there's a gap between them. So that would be the best way to do things. However, if you are dealing with a situation where there's a Jamaat and the Jamaat wants to pray now, from what I know, it's better for you to just stick with the Jamaat for multiple reasons. So if the Jamaat is doing the namaz together, you just stick with the Jamaat, and that can have somewhat of a greater effect. Plus, the Jamaat namaz technically, they do put a gap between these prayers a lot of times. Because like some people are doing nafilah, some people are doing different things. So usually there's a gap between the prayers anyways. So hopefully I answered your question, Brother Ali. Another ruling that I want to move on to is this ruling, and this should be something that is already clear for us, and we're coming to the end of the session. So again, if anyone has any questions, send them in before we move on, before we end, inshallah. That ruling is this. I've had this question sometimes with people asking me that they want to pray with our brothers from Ahl Sunnah. Some of these adhan times that we have are slightly different between us and our brothers and sisters from Ahl Sunnah. Can I pray with them? Can I pray with them and pray during a time that is before the time of our adhan? Right? This, of course, specifically this comes up with Maghrib, right? With Maghrib, there's a difference and a gap between when we pray and when they pray, right? The difference between Maghrib and sunset, of course. And the answer is no, that is not allowed. Of course, it's taqiyya, and that stuff is obviously doesn't apply to 90% of us. If it's for taqiyya, of course, a lot of things would be allowed for taqiyya, but no, it would not. This would not be allowed. There's another ruling that I want to move on to. Let me just see, because I think we had another question come in. If you're sleepy and able to pray on time, is it preferred to delay your salat until this drowsiness or tiredness gets taken care of? Yes. So another one of those factors that's really, really important is praying with, how they say you have to pay attention when you're praying, and like you have to have hudur al-qalb and all that stuff. So that obviously plays a role here. If you can pray later and you know that by praying later you will have a clearer mind, then yes, it's better to do that. Of course, it's better to figure out your schedule in such a way that you're not drowsy at the beginning of the time of namaz. But if it is a situation where you're drowsy for whatever reason, it's actually better to stick with whatever time I'm going to be able to pay attention more in salat. Funny thing is, even for fasting, they have the same thing, where for fasting they say praying on time is great. Much thawab is mentioned for those who pray while they're still fasting, meaning that they pray before they break their fast. But they say if you cannot pay attention like that, it's actually better for you to eat a little bit and then come and pray. So that's a very important factor. Such a small power nap, and thank you for the response previously. Yes, yeah. So you're talking about like a power nap or something like that. Yeah, that'll be preferred. Brother Muhammad Ali Jafar is asking, what is the ruling on prayers on tissue paper, normal bleached paper, or cardboard? Very good question. Let me see if I can find the ruling right here. So the ruling on that is it depends on what the paper is made of. Okay. If the paper is made of things that you can normally do your namaz on, you can normally do sajda on, then you can use paper or any material really to do your namaz, to do your sajda on them, right? The question was about sajda, right? Okay, let me see if I can just find the exact ruling right here, and we can just read right off of that. Yes, this is sajda. So this is ruling 1273 from توضیح المسائل جامع. اگر کاغذ را از چیزی که سجده بر آن صحیح است مانند چوب و کاه, if they are making this paper from things that you can normally do sajda on, like what things? Like for example, wood, which I assume is where most paper or paper tissues come from, wood, or kah, which is like I think that the equivalent would be something like I forgot what they would call that exactly in English. I can't remember exactly. Sorry about that. But basically, he says if it's from those things, it's allowed. و همچنین اگر از پنبه یا کتان ساخته باشد. Right? Also, if it is from cotton or it is from pambe, which is this is what happens when you know Farsi a little bit better than English. But the important thing is that you have to know that this piece of paper, whatever, is made of one of these things in order to do, which is normally the case anyways. So that's the answer to that question. Hopefully that answered the question. If it's bleached and all that stuff, it all depends on whether when you're putting your head on it, will your head come into contact with like the actual wood and stuff like that. That's what that will depend on. If you have a doubt about that, I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do sajda on that. Okay, Brother Abu Hadi is asking, salams wa alaikum salam. If you have tried your best to pray on time, but your salat becomes qada, will you get sins for this? Depends what we mean by, trying your best. If you're running late or whatever the situation is, we 90% of the time we're not placed in situations where we really have a proper excuse for not praying on time, to be honest, right? Like if I had discussions with people, they'll tell me like, Shaykh, I'm at school and there's nowhere for me to pray, so like, can I just I skipped my prayer? Well, no, you can't do that. And people say, I'm at work. I had a friend who said, I'm a mechanic and I'm doing work with the cars all day and I don't I said, well, you have a 5-minute break. You got to figure out that and let's just say you absolutely cannot do that. You have to pray one way or another. So let's just say hypothetically, this is a really, really extreme situation. None of us deal with a situation like this. But let's say you're in a situation where you absolutely have to work the whole time of the prayer and you can't, then you have to pray in your chair or something, right? Because namaz is one of those things that you cannot miss. If you forget to pray, no, you're not going to be held accountable for that. That's a different thing. But if this forgetfulness continues so much, and we talked about this before, if this forgetfulness continues so much that people say, hey, he's taking his namaz lightly, then you have to step up your game. You have to set up alarms. You have to tell someone to remind you maybe even, although again, these are extreme cases. But my point is you'll have to step up your game if this forgetfulness continues. Yes, if you forget once or twice, or if you fall asleep once or twice, no, there is no sin for that. This is, we have hadith about how, those types of things are forgiven in our religion. Brother Muhammad Ali is asking, does it have to be made purely from those items? For example, if it's bleached, would that be an issue? Like I said, if it's bleached, it wouldn't be an issue in and of itself, as long as, when you're putting your head on that thing, your head is coming into contact with the wood. Okay, but if you're in a doubt about that, from what I know, you're not allowed to do sajda on that, right? So that would be that. Sister Fatima is saying, at workplace, are we required to get permission before praying? Very good question. So that's a very good question. So this question can actually be brought up in two ways. I'm not sure which one Sister Fatima is referring to. If what Sister Fatima is referring to is in terms of the time that you set aside for your prayer, like the 5 minutes that you're going to pray, because you're taking this time away from the time that you were supposed to put in for your employer, that's one question. The other question is, do I have to ask for permission because I'm praying on a facility that someone else owns, or in the building that someone else owns? So that we'll get to later on when we talk about the place of prayer and basically where you're praying. We'll discuss that later on. But in terms of timing, it's it has to do very much with the common view, right? So what do I mean by that? In your work and in terms of the contract that you have with your employer, whoever that employer may be, is it an understood thing that you can take 5-minute breaks? If that's the case, if it's already understood, then you don't need permission. You just go and you do your namaz and your prayer. If no, it's like some very strict type of thing, right? Just as an example, let's say my employer says, Shaykh Mahdi, you have a Mizan live session, right? And during this time, I need you to be in front of the camera. You can't leave the Facebook live session going on. Then it's understood that I cannot leave, right? I can't say, oh, it's Maghrib time, I gotta go, right? I gotta go pray, right? So it all depends on what your understanding is between you and your employer. 95% of the time, employers are not gonna, it's understood that you can take a 5-minute break. People take 5-minute breaks to go and smoke and do, that kind of stuff. It's understood that you can take a 5-minute break for 95% of the time, right? Unless you're doing Mizan live sessions. If you're doing Mizan live sessions, you're stuck. Yeah, you can't move. All right. So those are the questions. We just have 5 minutes left. I'm gonna go through one last ruling. That is this ruling. Again, this is something that we don't deal with, although people ask this question quite frequently, and that is this: if we're in a place where we are praying our namaz and it's one of those places where the sun sets, it sets for 6 months or for 2 months, right? And it's night all the time, or it's day all the time. What are we supposed to do with our namaz? I actually didn't find that to the Khamenei's ruling on this issue, but Ayatollah Sistani does mention in his istifta'at that you're supposed to go based off of the closest place to you that does have a day and night. Just as a ruling, I'm just throwing out there in case we have anyone living in those, Sweden, some parts of Sweden and Northern Europe would fall under that category. Maybe Canada, I don't know, some parts of Canada. Okay, so that was the last ruling that I wanted to cover. He does say that if it's a place you live where they do have daytime, maybe I should go over this actually, because this is something that a lot of our brothers and sisters might actually deal with. If it is a place where it does have day and time, but the daytime is very short, let's just say it's 2 hours, all of daytime and the rest is night, he says you still have to do the namazes based on the normal timings, right? Even though 3 or 4 namazes will be packed in a couple hours, he says you still have to do that. The ruling I mentioned was situations where there is no daytime. That's where you have to do that. Okay, let's go through the last 2 questions and inshallah we'll end after that. Sayyid Arif is asking for permission to pray in the office building. Is it required from the owner of the company or your manager is enough? Again, if it's understood that you work here and if you're pretty sure that they're okay with it, you can pray. Yes, if it's private, real estate, for example, private building, yeah, you have to ask for permission. If it's a private situation and you think they would have an issue with it, right? But we'll discuss this more inshallah later on when we discuss the place of prayer. We'll discuss that later on inshallah, because there's so many situations that we deal with here where we have to pray outside. First of all, a lot of times it's public property. Property is the word I was looking for instead of real estate. Public property you're praying. You don't need permission for that. It's public property. You paid for it for with your taxes or whatever. And then a lot of times it's like, it might be like some gas station or some, like in Texas we have Buc-ee's, okay? It's not my fault. Brother Arif made me go there. So in Texas we have Buc-ee's. Now if someone's going to pray in the corner of Buc-ee's, Buc-ee's doesn't care. Buc-ee's has like 1 million customers coming in and out every day. It's like a huge, like, I don't know what they would call it, like a huge gas station, and they have a store and stuff like that. They're not going to care about that. But if it's a smaller place, then yeah, you go and ask for permission maybe. But we'll discuss, again, like I said, we'll discuss that more later on inshallah. Brother Ali is asking, are you held accountable for wajibat if you have qada, such as salat or fast, excluding the fact if one is making them up slowly and had the intent over time to make them up? What if they are trying to build habits sincerely and pray on time, and their willpower was such that they couldn't consistently make up prayers or even establish making qada up, but had the intent to establish one day, but passed away before he or their age started making up such? Okay. So the answer to that question is, as long as you are trying in such a way that people say, hey, he's making an effort to start making up these prayers, right? Then you're fine. If you pass away before that, before you make up all of your prayers, you're not going to be held accountable for that. You can, from what I know, you do have to put it in your will for other people to make it up for you, right? But if, let's just say he didn't even get a chance to do that, he's not going to be held accountable if he was making an effort, right? If he was acting in such a way where he wasn't even making an effort and he was just postponing it, which is usually not the case, then yes, that person will be held accountable for that. What about malls and stores? Again, malls and stores, those are the type of things where you're pretty sure that they're not going to have a problem with it. Yes, inside of a store, for example, they'll probably have an issue with it, right? What we can say for sure is that situations where you know they're not going to have an issue with it, then it's okay. You can go ahead and pray there, right? If you're in doubt, like it's a serious doubt and you really don't know, we'll get to that later on inshallah when we discuss about the place of prayer, when you have to ask for permission, when you don't. And Shaykh Amin has mentioned the point about the bleach. That's also noteworthy. Okay, 6:59. We're ending exactly on time. Actually, I was trying to condense the sessions inshallah moving forward to make them into like 45 minutes. But I guess you guys, the questions start coming in a little bit later. So, which is completely fine with me. But hopefully we can, inshallah, wrap it up within 45 minutes. So, having said that, inshallah, if anyone has not already followed the Facebook page, please do that or like it. If that way you'll get updates on what Mizan is doing. We have courses coming up on multiple different topics. Inshallah, this weekend actually, we have one in Hamilton, Canada coming up. We have another one, 2 or 3 actually coming up in January, where Shaykh Amin will be teaching those. And so please do sign up or do like or follow the page so that you get those updates. And inshallah, Shaykh Amin will be with you guys tomorrow discussing the aqaidi topic, the theological topic that he had started. Thank you very much for your questions. One last point that I do want to mention before we end is that we have gotten some feedback saying that it might be better to start the sessions maybe an hour later. Please do let us know if you guys would agree with that or you would prefer that. So because here, like where we are, 6 o'clock is basically, well, I guess 6 o'clock everywhere you are is where people get off of work. But so that feedback has been brought up, and so there is a good chance that we'll move on to 7 p.m. Of course, when the new flyer for the sessions in January come up, you guys definitely see what timings we're going to be using for January, inshallah. But do let us know if you prefer, which timing you would prefer, because I know some people I've talked to them, they say, no, it's better, I'm commuting and I listen to the session, it's easier for me. So let us know which one you guys would actually prefer. Thank you very much. You guys can always inbox us if you guys have any other questions after the session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.